Joining me now, Tom Homan, former acting ICE director and Fox News contributor. Tom, always great to see you. A presidency full of red herrings and ruses, Tom. Word games and copious and casual lying. Two things don't change. Alejandro Mayorkas still in charge of Homeland Security, and the Mexican cartel is still in control of our border. So what does change?
Nothing changes. It's quite disgusting what the president did and the administration did. They sanitized his visit. They cleaned the streets up. They cleaned the migrant centers up. They even cleaned the border up. And he spent most of his time at a port of entry. When he did talk to the management border patrol, he was at a border wall, border barrier, where the migrants aren't crossing. He should have went to the place where the migrants are crossing, that cartels have control, and talked to the men and women on the front line who are dealing with this crisis every day, because they would have told him the same thing they told Mayorkas, that it's his policies causing this historic surge. It's his policy causing record migrant deaths. It's his policy that's causing record opioid deaths in this country. So the sanitized trip was more embarrassing if he wouldn't even went at all.
Tom, let me look at the New York Post cover today, Too Little Too Late. This is in reference to Governor Greg Abbott's letter that he presented to President Biden upon arrival in Texas. $20 billion short, 2 years overdue. Take a listen to Governor Greg Abbott as he greets Biden and talks about on Fox News earlier today and what he had to say about the letter that he presented to the president yesterday.
I'm a Republican, and I have 5 specific proposals for you. And I pointed out those 5 specific proposals that do not require any new passage of law. They only require the president to enforce issues that have already been enacted into law by the United States Congress that would stop the flow of illegal immigration between the points of entry.
Tom, I know that you've looked at this letter, obviously, but going through the list of proposals they're really not proposals. It's like you must, because Texas alone went from spending a few $100 million every year to billions of dollars every year trying to protect the border and the citizens and legal migrants and legal residents of the state. But if you go through the items in the letter from Governor Abbott, you must comply with the many statutes mandating various categories of aliens that shall be detained. And I know that you've listed all of these, but you must designate the Mexican drug cartels as foreign terrorist organizations is the last one. Will any of those things happen under Biden?
Absolutely not. As far as detaining those who should be detained per the statute, per law, I actually assisted Attorney General in Texas. I testified in court on that hearing, and we won that. But this administration don't care. They're ignoring the court order on that. The judge says you are violating the law and you must follow the statute. And they're still not following the statute. So this administration doesn't care about the law. But I'll add one. If I would have been with Governor Abbott, I would have asked a few more things. Number one, this is the first time you've been around a green uniform. Are you going to apologize to the men of the Horse Patrol that you slandered at the White House podium in front of the entire nation that ruined their careers? Are you going to apologize to them and their families? Are you going to apologize to the Border Patrol in your first speech as a president saying they watched children starve to death on the banks of the Rio Grande River? This agency saves thousands of lives. They don't take life. Are you going to apologize to them because they had 14 suicides this year? Now, I'm not saying the open border caused these suicides, but it certainly added to whatever internal struggles they had to be dealing with horrific conditions on the border and seeing death every day and talking to girls as young as 10 that's been raped by the cartels. So I would ask him a few more questions on top of what Governor Abbott did. A better man would have, but this guy didn't.
Will he apologize to every single family who is grieving, who has lost a loved one to fentanyl poisonings in this country? That kills, as our own reporters have pointed out, that kills more people. More people die by fentanyl poisonings than cancer, car accidents, COVID, and suicide in the most recent year. Can the president stand up and just say, I'm sorry that fentanyl came from China across our southern border because I refuse to enforce our immigration laws that are on the books. And I'm sorry that your loved one, your son, your daughter, your husband, your wife, your grandchild is dead because we refuse to enforce the laws of our land.
No, he'll never do that. And I'll add one more thing to it. He's meeting with the president of Mexico. I guarantee you he isn't demanding that the Mexican government take action on the cartels that are producing that fentanyl. I guarantee he don't talk to the president of China, tell him to stop sending the precursors to Mexico to make these fentanyl drugs that kill Americans. This president's weak. That's the bottom line. You know, people want to say what they want. You know, President Trump, you know, you say he made America great again. I think President Biden's made China great again. He doesn't take control of the border. He went down there on a dog and pony show and didn't do one thing, not one thing, to say what he's going to do to secure the border. What he said at the end, they need resources, won't give it to them. What that means is the same old, same old. We'll send more resources down there to process aliens quicker and release them quicker, which is only going to bring more. This guy doesn't get it.
Tom, hang on for a moment. I want to go to Edward Lawrence. You're talking about meeting with the leader of Mexico. Edward Lawrence is in Mexico City, where the president is meeting with those leaders, with immigration, of course, on the agenda. Ed, to you.
Yeah, Dagan, and any minute the president is going to have the opening ceremony, so to speak, the reception ceremony, where he's going to talk with the Mexican president. It'll be the first public appearance where we see President Joe Biden. Now, the Mexican president greeted President Biden at the airport when he landed here in Mexico City, and they took an hour ride in the Beast through Mexico City. Now, we've uncovered that during that ride, the Mexican president asked President Biden if the U.S. would invest more in Mexico and other Latin American countries. He wanted to take it a step further and have a coordinated plan of monetary investment. President Obrador told President that if his new migration plan, that parole plan he put into place, if that's to be successful with deporting back to Mexico, there needs to be more money for Mexico to help. Now, in that conversation, no talk about ending the flow of migrants. It seems the Mexican president is looking at President Biden spreading some money around the globe at every stop he makes, and Mexico needs a little bit more of it, he says. Now, there seems a series of deliverables that will come out of these summit meetings. Accepting more than 30,000 migrants from the 5 countries in the parole program will not be one of them. We could see something about greater law enforcement coordination over fentanyl, but no major shift at the border policy.
What we need is to see how the program announced last week works in practice, what, if any, adjustments need to be made to that program, and then we can talk about taking the next step.
And Senator Marsha Blackburn thinks this is all a bunch of show with little substance as actually fixing the issue.
End, catch, and release. Put the Remain in Mexico in place. Keep Title 42 and give the Border Patrol what they have been asking for 3 decades, which is a barrier. That is, build the wall, better technology, and more agents on the ground.
So again, the president is going to go to that opening ceremony. After that, he's going to have that first bilateral meeting where they will have that in-depth discussion about the things that President Biden would like to see, as well as the things that the Mexican president would like to see. Back to you, Dagan.
Thank you, Ed Lawrence. Tom, when I hear the words, and this is not an insult at all to Edward, our great reporting from Ed Lawrence, but when I hear in-depth discussion between 2 leaders, that means that they're not going to do jack. You know what? In terms of the announcement last week from Biden, the New York Times headline was Biden announces major crackdown on illegal border crossings. But Mary Anastasia O'Grady has an incredible op-ed today in the Wall Street Journal talking about these 30,000 new visas that will be handed out every month to Venezuelans, Nicaraguans, Cubans, and Haitians, where they can apply from their home countries and fly into the United States. She calls it blackmail on migrants, where the administration is essentially being blackmailed by the leaders of Venezuela, these dictators in Cuba and Venezuela. She writes this, and I just want to get your reaction to what Ed said, but also this, that Caracas, Venezuela has been playing a key role in facilitating this migrant spike since Biden took office. That these migrants are essentially being used as a weapon of war, and that the United States is announcing these 30,000 visas a month, and that Biden sets a bad precedent in bowing to the blackmail, as so many of his Democrat predecessors did. That he's kowtowing to these leaders, these despots, if you will.
Well, you're actually right. Blackmail is probably a good word because, you know, the reporters talk about Mexico wants more money. Look, I've been around for 35 years. We've done this year after year after year. But, you know, President Trump, he was a game changer. What he did was, okay, we keep giving them millions of dollars every year and nothing changes. You know what I'm going to do? I won't take money away. So he called the 3 Central American governments. He called Mexico and says, not only am I not going to give you more money, I'm going to take all foreign aid away unless you do what you should do for humanity. Enforce your own borders. Enforce, you know, it's against the law in Mexico to traffic in women and children. President Trump changed the dynamics and says, not giving you money, I'm going to take everything away, and I'm going to start penalizing with tariffs. And you know what? That worked. But so what's this administration doing? Going back to the same old failed model that's thrown millions of dollars down there to corrupt countries, and that money will never get to where it's supposed to go. So, and as far as this new parole policy,
right,
all he's doing is sidestepping the asylum program. He's legalizing illegal immigration. Parole 30,000 in, then at the end of the month he's going to say, hey, guess what? Illegal entry is down by 30,000. Well, no kidding, because you went down south and legalized them and brought them in through a port of entry. They're going to lose this in court. There's a case pending in Florida. I'm a part of that. The misuse of parole policy. You can parole on a case-by-case basis after analysis for a significant public benefit or law enforcement purpose. You just can't award parole at 30,000 people a month, and I hope they use that speech as Exhibit A in the trial this week in Florida.
Very good. So Caracas was helping traffic these people into the United States, and note that all that money of illegal migrants, it was going back to Venezuela. It helps prop up these regimes. It's just insane.
Well, absolutely.
Tom.
It's absolutely right.
Good to see you. Tom Homan. Always
Good
a
to see you.
pleasure, sure. I'll see you soon.